Like 4.6.
That's how every meeting starts at school. Today is Thursday, January 9th. This is the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. Those present are myself, Counselor Shoup, and Counselor Cushing, as well as town staff. Item number 3 is approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion? Any discussion? All those in favor? All right. Item 4 is review of budget calendar. Tom or Norm, if you guys are going to kind of walk us through.
Sure. Liam, are you able to pull it up? So as Liam pulls it up, what we put together is kind of the traditional calendar. The first one hits the high points in terms of budget presentation, first reading, public hearing, second reading, and of course, validation vote. I think there's a couple of points that I'd like to put your attention to there. That's, again, very customary, kind of very traditional with the last 5 years or so. And then really a point that I want to make sure you spend some time talking about is your review process. Last year, we tried something different. We did 2 longer sessions as opposed to 5 or 6 smaller ones. And I think you've had some debrief at the end of that session. We've set it up the same way, but we're totally amenable. That's your process to define. So I would encourage you to have some conversation around that. Just a question for you for the presentation. We're proposing that for March 26th. That would be an off-council meeting. And that's been the tradition in recent years to do it outside of in a separate and apart from the first reading. That being a standalone single issue night, we could start it earlier than 7. I would propose 6, just so it's not a late night for folks, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, it's fine with me. Is that, would that work for the school as well?
Okay. So I did highlight that. We'll change that to 6 p.m.
Right.
And then just while I've got the floor, the second sheet is one that you might be familiar with. This is one that Kate puts together. It's much more detailed. And it gives the full calendar, including town council meetings, school board, so on and so forth. And I think, I know Kate and I have coordinated our efforts in that regard. So I'll stop there and I guess turn it back to you for some discussion, particularly around process for review.
So I'll just kick it off. Like, I thought last year's worked well, better than when we do multiple throughout the week. So if you guys are good with that, and if, I mean, would the staff have any feedback for that? Did they feel like that worked?
Yeah, I think we liked it. Yeah, we did. This also gives you some time on the back end. There's a couple of weeks after that second session, should you want to do some further deliberation. So I think it works well in that regard too.
So
We suggested April 17th and 24th, so kind of back to back.
I just made plans and I'm gonna be out of town.
it looks like April 10th and 11th is when we would do the.
Oh, excuse me,
staff
April.
session.
Yes,
And then the 17th is a
you.
regularly scheduled finance committee meeting. I
Thank you.
think 24th is school vacation, so I had mentioned to staff that I would like to try and not have a meeting that week if we
Right.
can avoid it.
Yeah.
But I think we will have it on the calendar potentially as a tentative meeting if we need it. I think the difference this year for this proposal than other years is really we're trying to get second read complete so that it can be part of the, it's available when early.
For the voters?
Yeah, when the voters start to vote, which I think sometimes we're either.
Most years are voting without an actual bottom line number, which is awkward.
I literally made plans today to be out of the country, maybe coming back the 9th or the 10th.
Okay,
So of April.
April.
So I would, yeah.
That's no way to come back from
Um,
vacation.
are you kidding? She can read on the airplane.
Well, so, and I'm gonna be very selfish right now, and I will just say I now work from home on Mondays and Tuesdays, so I don't know if we could kick
Sure.
it to maybe like the following, 14th and 15th. And I'm being very selfish right now. You can say no, but I'm just saying like,
I think that's probably not a bad idea because it just gives us more time to review, come up with questions that we could share with staff. So I think I could do the 14th and 15th.
Just subject to me making sure the space is available, but I'm sure that works fine for us.
Does that work for you, Counselor Cushing?
April.
Yep. So it'd be a Monday and a Tuesday.
The calendar stuff I have, it's not looking good. It's like in Massachusetts, finally, vote regarding it up here sometime between May, probably between the 8th and the 15th. So I just want to give you a heads up that I'm fine on May 7th. After that, I get an issue.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Because if we have second read on the 7th,
Yes.
so then you would be there for second reading for where we would propose our recommendations and, yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes.
And that would be a 3 to 7 block. Does that work for folks?
no.
Okay. No, that's,
I could do in the middle of the day. When does track get out for? I don't know.
On the 14th and 15th.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
or sorry, April.
And we can do this offline. I don't know. I apologize, but,
Mhm.
I can do later on Wednesdays and Thursdays or Wednesdays and Thursdays, or maybe a Friday, but
I mean, would we want to do mornings on the 14th and 15th? Just try and do like 8 to 12 on those 2
I mean,
days?
Yeah.
if that's a,
Yeah, and that'd be easier to have space
Again,
too.
it should be, but I'll just confirm it.
So we can plan for that, just two
Yep.
early morning sessions that week.
14th to 15th, roughly, I'll look to block this out for 4 hours, whether we need it
Yeah.
entirely. And then I'll propose, a method so it's efficient and we're able to kind of put together for certain departments that make sense to be heard at the same time, back to back and so forth.
My only comment on the calendar is, we'll have the presentation on the 26th
Mhm.
and then a workshop on the 16th, but we won't have really had the opportunity to make any adjustments or anything. So what would be the intent of the workshop on the 16th with the school board, or would we need one?
That's a fair point. We've done that in recent years. That would be the public hearing date because that's your council meeting. I think in recent years, we've done a workshop that same evening
Mhm.
as just, I think, a reason to convene both the BOE and the town council on budget. But it's still very much in process at that point.
Yeah, that's why I'm just not sure what we would want to get out of a workshop.
And keep in mind, that's back to back to back. So 14th, 15th, and then 16th as well. So that does change things.
When would the next council meeting be, though? It wouldn't be until the 7th, right? So we
Correct.
wouldn't really be able to have a workshop unless we. Can I ask our school friends, do you guys feel like there's a need for the workshop on the 16th, or is there something unique that you think we would want to do there to make it a worthwhile exercise to have everybody in the room?
Agree, John, that it's early.
Yeah.
That it's early because you guys are just beginning to get the department reports and kind of working through that.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it would be an opportunity for the full team to ask questions. Will the full council come to the workshops?
They may not. So that's a good point. It could be,
Because usually, it's like inviting people who aren't on the finance.
yeah, that's true.
April has a fifth Wednesday, interestingly, so there may be an opportunity to grab a workshop later in April.
I don't know if
It's
I
nice
want-
to have a fifth Wednesday and have it off.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
But I think it's a good point. I think, not only will we have digested it and heard from staff at the finance committee level, we can, at the public hearing, the committee can share kind of what we've learned, what we've heard, and use that to also get any feedback from counselors as they've dug in, anything that they've observed or heard. So it's just probably a really good opportunity. And same thing for the board, if they've had meetings and they want to provide updates. So maybe we just keep it as is and just see what we can do to make
Yeah, by then you will have met with the school board, the school department. If there's a reason that comes up that you think a workshop is needed, then
Mhm.
we'll find a way to make it happen. We do have that kind of extra week, extra Wednesday in the back end of April if you need to slide to it.
Okay.
So-
So keep that on the 16th. You guys okay with that for the workshop?
Oh, okay, so we're keeping that.
Yeah, well, we're keeping it, and we'll just, if we need to change it to the 25th for whatever reason, we can
Okay.
discuss it. But again, I
Great.
think, again, at that point, other counselors will have a few weeks. They could have watched the meeting on their leisure, and then again, we just have a conversation. And if it's a short workshop, it's a short workshop.
Be nice.
The only other thing I had on the calendar was, and it's not on here yet, is how we want to do roundtables and if we want to do roundtables again. My suggestion was if we do them, we try and piggyback them either on a school finance committee meeting or a council finance committee meeting. So that way we don't have another date that we have to work through. So like we could, if we have one maybe on when we have our finance committee meetings on like the 17th, could just be extended, or we could have a short finance committee meeting with the intent of, having a broader conversation with the public, or we could do something on the first. And then we can look at the school finance committee schedule and just work with them to see if there's something where they want to extend or add an hour as an option.
By roundtables refresh.
So like what we did last year where we
We
would just,
went out to the community centers and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I thought that was useful. I will defer to you on the scheduling
okay,
of those. I think that when we go out into the community, Nick, you can speak to this, it clearly sends a message that we are interested and engaged. I think we learn some things. We give a lot of people an opportunity to vent. Sometimes they need that. So I found it to be a useful exercise.
mhm,
So I think it's better that we go places where people will come.
yeah.
So we, as opposed to just sort of sitting in a room and waiting for folks, it's better to.
Yeah, I was just
Fine.
looking at the community services like schedule for the seniors. I wonder if we could do like, get on their schedule and like do a group, like a roundtable with the
Okay.
seniors or something like that. I think it's definitely important to put them out there, even though
Mhm.
people don't always attend or it's low attendance. I think it's important for residents to see that that's always out there and
Yeah.
available.
Maybe it's a hybrid, right? Like maybe there's one thing here because I do feel like some people now expect it. So to have at least one opportunity here, but then we can see if there's other opportunities and maybe we can just partner with the school to figure out what that looks like. Maybe that's something on the communications committee too. We can
Sure.
discuss tomorrow because we're talking budget too, or next
Say
week,
tomorrow.
sorry.
So when you're ready, I had one more thing.
Yep.
So,
I'm-
so, I probably have the luxury of the most flexibility among you, so I'm not going to quibble over the schedule unless there's something serious. The thing that is most important to me as we listen to the departments, the school presentations, is that there is some real structure to them and they're designed to answer some very specific questions. What have we accomplished with what we had last year? What are we hoping to accomplish this year and why? And what are our needs in priority order? And to actually put a time limit on that. And I say time limit based on my experience teaching in Dale Carnegie, where I became amazed to learn how much people can convey when you're given 90 seconds to convey it in a specific set of things they needed to meet. Now, I'm not suggesting that we relegate this to 90 seconds, but my hope is that the softer side of the conversations will take place as we listen to department heads prior to our goal setting meeting, so that we can begin to incorporate that stuff. So that's a great place to hear the stories and the accomplishments. I'm not saying that stuff is irrelevant. I'm just saying that I would prefer to hear that kind of more anecdotal kind of dialogue around the time if we're setting goals. And then when we come down here to talk about money, then we're focused on what our specific needs are relative to where we've been and where we think we're going.
Mhm.
And to hold people accountable to that format. That's just my preference.
Any thoughts or reactions to that? Yeah, I mean, I'm similar in the sense of like, what I would like these to be is, and I think because one, we're lucky that you've been on for the past 3 years for this, right? Or this will be your third. So you now know what staff does. I've been here for 4 years, so I'm pretty aligned and we have that meeting. So if we really just focus more on what are the investment needs, why those are the right investment needs, and that prioritization, like I think that's the meat of the conversation that we want to have and really understand, and then just better understand why those are the right priorities.
And I think that to say that now up front, there really shouldn't be any confusion, at least from my part, about, it's not a lack of interest in what folks are doing and learning more and so forth. It's much easier to take all that stuff in when you are forward-looking and not under the gun to make hard choices. And then having that context as the year has evolved gets us to a place where we can really have a focused discussion with real opportunity for back and forth dialogue and questions that help us to get to a good decision. I think it's, so that's just my opinion.
Mhm.
And you know what they say about those.
And I don't remember much from last year, but I felt like last year worked well. And so I feel like it was,
We had a standard set of slide deck, if you will, so 4 or 5 slides. We can modify them to be a little more focused on what I'm just hearing now. So shorter and more direct is what I'm hearing.
I think that's the point here. Some important highlights, more quantitatively driven, if that's possible. So more. Karen's not sitting next to me tonight, or
Yeah.
quantitatively driven, if that's possible. I think we started to get into a little of that last night where, Norm, you were referring in the finance, you know, to, look, you know, we've improved our efficiency in this department by X% here, you know, blah, blah, blah. We graduated this many students. I don't know, but I had this conversation in depth with Kate this past week. And I don't want to speak for her, but I think that I felt like I got a reasonably good reception for this concept. I see heads nodding back there. So, and then look, this is what we want. This is why we want it. And maybe this would happen if we don't get it. This is what we, you know, aren't getting, or what we'd love to have, but if we have to choose.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I would just say that, just appreciate that some of what we do isn't easily quantifiable, or those metrics don't tell you much. Just the nature of some of the work we do. In other cases, I think it's really appropriate. So,
Sure. But I'll give you a very specific example of, I think, something that is quantifiable, not quantifiable. You know, I bump into our ranger folks because I'm on the beach lot, and it's hard for me to discern based on observations what exactly is happening. That's not a criticism. It's just, I'm down there, I'm wondering. So, but if somebody said to me, look, you know, I've engaged with this many people, we solved these kinds of problems, we did this stuff, I'd be like, that's great. And I don't think it needs to be necessarily, you know, I saved the town this much money. It could be, you know, sometimes one thing is worth the entire banana. But I think for me, as a financial steward, I mean, I want to know some of that stuff, and I don't want to know it because I'm trying to be harsh on me. I'm trying to say that if we can't quantify some kind of result, whether it's process or outcome or whatever, then you have to ask yourself, what are we doing? That's just me.
yeah, I mean, I think it goes, for me, it's more helping us just understand by department, like what we talked about at one of their last meetings, which is there are some things that are changing because they change, like inflation, whatever, and that's kind of like to keep services. And then there are new investments that we're looking that support important things to the community, and for us to continue to provide those same services at an expectation that our community expects. And so what I'm hearing you say is, like, talk a little bit about how we are delivering on what the community expects and some examples, and then get into the numbers of, now here's what it means financially. We need to increase over here by 10% because of whatever, and then we want to make investments in here and here to you know, do XYZ things that we want to see happen next year.
Is that really focused on the new investments that we may be asking for as opposed to evaluating existing programs? You know, Park Ranger is a good example. It's $35,000 out of a $2.7 million budget. And I don't know that we're gonna be asking for any more, but
No, but.
I know it's-
only
it was
use
an
that
example.
as an Example.
Yep.
Because I think that there are, we probably see that in the phone calls coming into your office, is
Mm.
that many of us Scarboroughnians are brushed by their experience with the town. They, you know, encounter something that looks odd to them, they don't understand it, and then they put their own set of
Mhm.
judgments on it for better or for worse. And all I'm saying is that I begin with the assumption that everything we do has a solid rationale and underpinning it, it's accomplishing something. And I probably don't understand it, but I'd like to, so I could explain it to someone else in whatever terms are possible. And you know, I don't. Anyway.
I think what would be helpful for us to see and refresh ourselves is what was the presentation last year so that we can just revisit it, because I do feel like, again, just from my gut, I do feel like we are accomplishing that in what we did last year. I think it's just more about how do we get to the meat and bones quicker of like, so that we can have more discussion versus less presentation.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't think we're asking for much different than last year. I think it's just more how the conversation itself falls, but it would be helpful for us all probably to like relook at last year's presentations and just see if there's any tweaks or adjustments
Sure.
we'd like to see.
Yep, we'll share that slide deck.
And honestly,
Yeah,
if
sorry,
I'm a-
let's let
if I'm a
Karen.
department manager who's gonna come in and present to this meeting, I might want to review the tape and see what I might expect from Cushing.
Yeah.
I mean, I only mean that half facetiously, is to understand who your audience is. So however it comes out, I think, you know, anybody who is interested understands what my bent is,
Counselor Shoup?
which is better than being a surprise.
Sure. So I guess I will just go back to my comment from the last meeting where part of the reason I didn't want to focus on that 3% mill rate goal was because one of the things that I would like to see is each department come with, this is what we think we need to run as efficiently as we can. And then really see what they think in their department. They're the experts, you know, what could we do to make us great? And then we have to be realistic about, you know, well, that gives us like, you know, a 10% increase. So that's not realistic. And I think that was part of the conversation was like, we really want to see what their wants are, their needs are, but not spend a lot of time on it, but at least acknowledge them, I think, things like that. And again, I just want to stay away from that 3% goal.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I've given thought to that, and I very much appreciate your invitation and your interest in knowing what that is, because oftentimes there's things that don't ever reach you.
Well, and I think it's good for the residents to
Yeah,
see.
no, fair point.
I feel like by the time you guys get to us, you've had all these backroom conversations where we're not seeing all the sacrifices or maybe the choices that you guys are making. And I want everyone to see those choices up
Yes,
front.
a strategy we've used in the past is what's in the budget and what's not in the budget. You know, what doesn't pass the test for whatever reason. I think that's something we could add. That might give you some insight in terms of the process that happens before it gets to you.
and I think the school does a good job. They do that a lot in their budget. They always say, this is what it funds, but this is what we aren't doing. And you did start doing that last year, so I think,
I personally think sometimes staff is already restricting themselves knowing we have this 3% goal. And so I'm saying if we get rid of the goal, maybe we would hear a little bit more about what they think they need to make Scarborough better and their department better. We can dream a little, right?
I sent Liam last year's slide deck for finance, if you want to go back through it real quick and,
yeah. I think we can do that probably as our homework,
yeah.
just to kind of revisit. Again, I thought last year went really well. I don't have significant.
I wasn't
changes.
gonna represent it. I was just gonna show you that we just did highlights and a few graphs of the cost breakdown between the three major categories.
We'll circulate that, and if you'd provide feedback, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think it would be good for us to get it, and then at the next meeting, we can maybe fine tune the specific asks that we want to see again, not trying to make it like a huge lift for staff, but at least be clear on like, what are the, to your point, like, what are the things that we want to listen to, and then what are the things we want to discuss and make sure that we have that, it's set up
Yeah,
appropriately.
if you give us that feedback at your next meeting,
Yeah.
there'll still be time for us to prepare accordingly.
Okay. So now we're gonna move to the next item, which is to discuss the Sustainability Reserve Fund. And so if we're gonna do swap.
Yep.
Team swap. Yeah, you guys are welcome to come.
Yeah,
you're
coming up here.
Give Rick the mic.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening, and sorry, we are trying to, we do have a hard stop at 6.
I warned them.
Okay.
Yeah. And my beer is cold enough, so we don't have to have it on ice any longer.
But I think like today, we might not be able to have too much discussion, depending on how much you guys want to share, but I think we came in today really kind of wanting to better understand the request. And again, from here, maybe we can talk about next steps if we want to pursue this further or what we want to do next.
Sure. So I'm happy to give just a quick overview, and other members of the Sustainability Committee can chime in. So you may recall that the Sustainability Committee sent this committee a memo late 2023 requesting that a sustainability reserve account be established to help fund sustainability projects in Scarborough. The fund was identified in the town's 2017 Energy and Sustainability Plan. There was an action in there to establish a fund. And so the committee has proposed a funding scheme that includes if there's any excess revenues from electrical permits, taking a portion of those and dedicating them to a reserve account. And then we are also in the process of updating the EV charging ordinance. And as part of that ordinance, there's an in lieu fee associated with that. And so as when that ordinance is updated, we'll be proposing changing the requirements of the in lieu fee or what it can go towards to make it more general to support sustainability projects, energy efficiency, waste management, things of that nature. And really the goal for this is that we've found that the committee has found that they're limited in pursuing projects and grant funding because a lot of times local match is required. And we don't have a dedicated funding source for that local match, and the grants don't always align with the town's municipal budget cycle. And so having dedicated funding for sustainability projects that would be authorized, expenditures would be authorized by council, would give us more flexibility to be able to respond to grant opportunities and the like. And I will leave it at that. If you guys have anything that you want to share, or we're happy to answer questions, have discussion.
Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think she did a good job framing that. I just want to reiterate that this was something we had thought of back in 2017.
Mhm.
And it was approved by your former colleagues. And we really, feel like if we're going to put something in a plan and, we need to take action on the plan. That's what a plan's for. And so this would kind of like round out the sustainability plan that we have now, and future work of the Sustainability Committee would then be now to take a look at the plan and see where it needs to go moving forward.
Mhm.
So really, it kind of puts a period on this comprehensive plan that we have now.
Looks like you have a question. Yep.
So I think the biggest question I have is who are these funds available to? Is this just for the town to use for their projects? Who can, is it something, how do you access the funds and who can? So the way that it's been thought of currently is that it would go towards town-sponsored projects. We have contemplated establishing maybe a grant program where similar to South Portland has had grants for electric, like lawn equipment and things like that.
we're not there yet. We don't have a fund. So really at this point, it's kind of establishing the fund and building it up over time so that we can explore these opportunities. So perhaps making it available back to the public. But at this point, the thought was, do we want to do more rooftop solar projects in town? Do we want to expand our food waste collection locations and things like that? That requires money, and a sustainability fund could support that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the biggest unknown to me before you came was who could apply for it. So I think hearing that this is strictly we're using funds in lieu of fees and things like that, putting in a separate account strictly for the town to access, I have like no issues with that at all. The fact, especially because, I mean, one of our goals is grants,
Yeah.
right? So here you're telling us if we do this, this will give us more access to grants. I mean, I think I had concerns because I was worried that maybe individual residents were going to be applying, and I was like, that just was a bit much for me. I think this is a nice way
For me too. That's not my favorite
nice
idea.
way to start, and I think it's totally appropriate. I mean, so.
And you know, if fiscally responsibility, the fiscal responsibility of this is when the town does a sustainability project, one of the benefits is a reduction in costs. And that reduction in cost makes much better impact, or provides a pathway for more impact if we can use some of that savings to continue the work and generate more savings. So it becomes really a perpetual way in which the town can pursue further cost-saving measures. And I think that's important. I'll go back to the streetlight endeavor that happened. There was some significant savings associated with that. And that gets, decisions have to be made. But just to throw it into the general fund, we lose some opportunities to further invest in smart building practices or smart growth or climate resiliency and those kind of things. So I would love to see this be part of the budget and in the budget. And it reminds me of some of the other initiatives that are in the town, like the sidewalk, opportunities where developers pay fees that go and collectively help the town.
Yeah.
So this is the way I've envisioned this to be able to work. And I'll make a final comment. More and more federal grants that I've seen come through require some sort of cost share. And sometimes, as Jamie pointed out, it doesn't fall well within the cycle of a town budget. And this would give us the opportunity to apply for grants to, make a meaningful impact.
Questions?
Yep.
Are there other towns around us that have this?
Yes, there's a lot of towns that, as Rick was kind of alluding to, will do projects. And once the efficiency project is essentially paid for, so once you recoup the initial investment, any additional savings over what, like, for example, the LED streetlights,
Right.
we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars per year on our electrical costs because we converted all of our streetlights to LED streetlights. A lot of towns will take that fund, the savings, once the initial like $900,000 investment is paid off, and put that into an account to do more energy efficiency projects like that. That's a really cumbersome kind of formula and way to do it. It makes a lot of sense. It's just difficult to gauge and to track and and all of that. So, which is why we are proposing taking a portion of excess revenues from electrical fees, or electrical permits, I should say, because you need an electrical permit to install an EV charger, to install a heat pump, to install rooftop solar. All of those things are related to the work of the sustainability committee. And so directing some of those funds into the reserve account. And then again, as I mentioned, the EV charging in lieu fee, which I have to say, I've heard of one developer contemplating paying the fee instead of complying with the ordinance. So I don't know that that's necessarily, like, people are complying, which is great. So I don't know that that's
We
necessarily.
won't get rich off of that.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope.
not going to be a big influx.
Except for cost coverage.
Our ordinance.
So this
isn't
was
in place.
before we had the ordinance, Karen. I wish we had it then.
I was just gonna say, I guess that's my question, because you answered one of my questions, like, when I look at just the electrical permit fees, we're talking a couple $1,000s a year, which doesn't feel like we're really making an investment and.
It's more than we're making now,
Yes,
though.
that's true.
So we see this
Yeah.
as a starting point.
If you can find more
yeah.
places where you're gonna add to it, by all means, that's within your purview.
But a typical match is 10%, so $100,000 grant, $10,000, so.
So that was my question with the grant. Are you not, does the money have to be in this type of fund to get the grant? Or you're just saying the money's not there, so we're missing these grants?
It's just not dedicated and
Does it need to be dedicated?
it doesn't need to be
No.
dedicated, but just in terms of our, like the town's accounting practices and budgeting process, it's helpful if it's kind of set aside and earmarked for that type of work. Because we might find out about the grant in August and it's due in October, and who knows if they're gonna offer it again the following year, so that if we have to plan for it as part of our
Yeah, we could do
budgeting
it through the
cycle.
budget process. We should, frankly, if we have awareness of it, but oftentimes it's an opportunity we can't take advantage of. So the way this would work, and we do have a couple of examples, is the council, I would recommend the council control this and it be set up fairly directly such that it's self-fulfilling as best it can be, so it doesn't have to keep coming back to you. So as was mentioned, there's a couple of revenue sources. We would set it up so it has clarity as to what Norm and his team does at the end of the fiscal year, that certain percentage of excess fees from this go here. And we execute that at the staff level. It doesn't come back to you every time. And conversely, on the flip side, it also describe what the allowed uses are. In any event, the council controls that. So if we want to tap into it, staff or committee would come to you with a proposal, say we'd like $8,000 of the reserve money for this purpose, and you have the authority to direct that at any time at your direct discretion.
So this is a little new to me. I've been trying to wrap my head around it, and as best I can understand it, what you are describing is an investment fund. You're stating that, and that we need to put some seed money in that investment fund in order to begin doing things that produce a return on that investment. Is that fair?
I'd call it a reinvestment fund.
Yeah.
Well, bear with me. And Tom, what you were just alluding to, if you take it out to another world in a mutual fund, there's a prospectus. And the prospectus says what our financial goals are. It says what we plan to invest in and what we hope to achieve with those investments. And on that basis, I would think this would be a great idea, as opposed to, broad set of parameters to say, we're gonna take a couple of $1 million. Maybe we're gonna slow down a little bit on how fast we get to our goal of 16.2% of unassigned fund balance, that sort of thing. But if we're gonna talk about that serious money, then I think behind it, we need to talk about a prospectus in which the investors, who are the town, get to see what the return on that investment was. So I think your example of the fact that we use sustainability funds, we leverage them, on a one-to-one basis to get this much money. We converted every light bulb in the place to an LED, and that saved us this much money on our electric. That's a great story. And so if that's really what we're talking about here, I think it's great. I would just want to make sure that we were holding ourselves accountable to that kind of discipline, because essentially that's what you're asking us. We're the board of directors, if you will. The council is the board of directors, and you guys, in a sense, would be the money managers, and you'd be going out there looking for projects, looking for returns, and trying to operate within a set of parameters that we all agree govern the use of these funds. That's, I'm saying the same, it's a different way of looking at it, but in essence, please tell me if I'm wrong about the way I understand.
I mean, my perspective is, we make investments in sustainability because there is a significant return. And this fund would help us pursue grants and potentially in some investments that we want to do that will have a return. Use this fund potentially instead of just going to bond like we would typically do. And so this just creates another avenue to fund projects that instead of putting it in the CIP, we could say, well, how much money do we have in the sustainability fund? Can we use some of that instead of going fully to bond?
Fair enough, but I think you called it out. At least the two identified potential revenue sources aren't likely to produce significant money, at least in the near term. Having said that, there may be additional projects in the future that we can't even envision today.
Yeah.
And it would be, in the front end of that, we're going to do this. We expect it's going to produce this sort of savings. There could be a decision made by the council at that time that a certain portion or the savings is directed here.
Yeah.
And again, those are directives to staff, so it doesn't come back to you. You just tell us where to put the money once the savings are realized.
I don't necessarily think it'd be a bad idea to have a line item in the budget that goes into this fund against the prospectus to say that, the town has said on multiple occasions, this stuff is important to us. And the most compelling reason to do that, other than just put a couple of projects in the mix every year, is that it gives you the flexibility to go out into the grant world and leverage those funds. So if you say to me as a taxpayer, would you take a little bump in your mill rate to put this money in here so that we could leverage that money, get more to do better? I like that story. Otherwise, we just put it in the budget put a project in the budget every year and go for it.
I think you'll see that to the extent that we're aware of projects. I would recommend that we run through the normal budget process. I think it needs to be there and discussed in the context of all the other needs of the town. So I expect we would follow that path as well. And certainly for the high dollar value items, I think that's going to have to go through budget. And we should have good line of sight and awareness of those sorts of big issues.
I think Tom's point about identifying projects is something that may not have been recognized by the townspeople to the extent that the Sustainability Committee has resources out in the world, and Jamie does a terrific job of bringing information to us and identifying things that could make a difference. And if at the same time saves the town some money, then we don't have to increase the mill rate if we've saved the money. So the example that comes to mind right now is if we could increase the amount of food waste that's removed from the waste stream and recognize the amount of energy that EcoMaine has to use in order to burn off or boil off the water in wet waste that we send to them. If we divert that to something like a homeowner's compost pile, then that's saving money. That's sending less weight to be disposed. And this is an idea, a small, modest idea that comes in through the committee as an advisory group. And then we would then follow the protocols and submit the request to the town for use of whatever is needed to either publicize or buy more containers or do something in order to recognize that saving. So it's a process that starts with public information and people sitting around a table and trying to identify projects that we think would be
I hear you.
useful.
I just think that example is going to be really difficult for us to agree on the savings, to track it, I hope none of us are thinking, I don't want to set up a really complicated system. I think the two revenue items that you've indicated are finite. They are what they are. They don't need much interpretation. There will be opportunities potentially in the future, but I think the challenge will be how we administrate the administrative aspects of that.
I was just talking about identifying
Yeah.
a need or a step.
We can always have more ideas and we have fun for it. That's
fair enough.
normal.
Fair
I mean, but that in itself is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So you can
For
pick
sure.
and choose.
Yeah, to Tom's point, like if we want to move this forward in the simplicity of what's been proposed to say, we would like to establish this fund with these two sources. I do think there's probably more we should do, but this is at least a start.
Baby steps always are, are very helpful.
Yeah, so
Future council action can modify it further as we know more and want to expand.
can I ask a question though, before we motion to move it forward? Why 20% of the electrical fees? Why not higher? Why, how did you guys pick that 20% as the recommendation?
Autumn's being stingy.
So Autumn is the one that manages,
Well, now
those-
I don't want to take any money. When you said that, I'm like, that's all you had to say. No.
so that was her recommendation.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that she probably would have been open to more, just thinking about, you know, right now that does go into the general fund, and wanting to recognize that those funds have been used not for a dedicated purpose, so don't want to kind of overextend.
Right, those
what we're
monies right
thinking.
now go to the unassigned fund balance.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of priorities. I think we've made some great gains as was discussed last night. So, 6 months ago, the conversation might have been different.
Yeah,
frankly.
I feel like 20% is low, especially knowing.
You can bump it up.
How do you feel about bumping it up?
I think my answer to that is when I read what the sustainability committee is about, conservation, saving money on energy, solar, those kinds of things. My answer is a little different. It's tell me how much it's going to take to accomplish something big that's going to matter. And
Mhm.
under those circumstances, I'd say, let's bump it up. But if you say, let's just put more money in the piggy bank so that maybe we can have a bigger imagination, I say have a big imagination, and then tell us how much seed money, investment money you need.
Well, the thing about sustainability projects is that they're scalable. So you can go small or you can go big and do it all at one time.
Well, I think, but that's exactly what I'm saying. So if you say this much money is enough to get a lot of proof of concept, if you will,
Mhm.
okay, to demonstrate that this type of thing actually does produce a return. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an economic return. It could be a return.
Beneficial return.
It could be a benefit multiplier that, it's hard, I don't have the words for that, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
So I'm not necessarily saying that this is all, has to be all about dollars and cents, has to be within the scope of your mission. And so so what I would ask is say, think about what are you imagining? And I love the idea of imagining scalable projects, because a nice thing is that you do a little one and you say, woohoo, this paid off. And if we had a little bit more money, we can scale it and we could do better. That's a great story to hear.
I just feel like we're not gonna be able to hear that story forever if we don't put more money in the fund so that it can be used.
So
And that's where I'm like, yeah, so if we can, because again, when I look at it, they're saying, I mean, if the trend is correct, it would be maybe $4,000 that would go in this year into the fund, and so that just doesn't feel like
that
enough
seems
to
way, that seems fiddly. to
yeah,
me.
that's why I'm like, should we go higher at least to like
I-
50% of the electrical permit fees, which again, might allow for something next year to
Well,
actually tap into this to do
It
something.
seems to me if you're trying to get a $25,000 grant and it's a matching funds grant or something like that, you need to have some real money in there.
Yeah.
So, I would say, it sounds to me like, it feels to me like I just had to pick a number, anticipating some matching funds. I'd say put 20 grand in there. That means that if you can find a grant that's going to give you 10, if you put in 10, you've blown half the budget, but you've doubled your money. And again, to my mind, that is the most compelling reason to do this, is the ability to think bigger, do more, and do that by leveraging external money, which I think we discussed last week. So John, I guess I'd see your 10 and raise your 10.
Karen, what do you
Liking
think?
your conversation.
Are we, Do you want to go higher than the 20% of the?
Was this the only funding source? Is that what we're saying?
It seems like what I heard was, while we could have the in lieu fee for electrical vehicles, it's not, like, most are complying, and so really the primary source
It's
is.
just not dedicated
Yes.
specifically to this.
But right now, the only real financial source may just be these electrical permit fees. And again, when you look at 2023, 8,000, that's not too much bad, but again,
I guess that seems like nothing to me. I'm not sure what sustainable projects cost. I'm more inclined to be like, can we just like drop 50 grand in there and then slowly trickle in a source after that? Like, what about like an initial funding?
initial
An
investment.
initial investment or something?
Here's an example of something that we're working on now. We're looking to decommission the Trigen facility.
Mhm.
We're looking for a buyer. It's like selling a used car. And we don't have a good experience with it, so it's kind of hard to give it a shining recommendation, but there'll be some proceeds of that. That's an example of something wasn't expected in the budget. At the time, I come to you with the sale of that. You could choose to direct the proceeds of that to a fund like this if it's created.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're talking about is setting up in the first instance, kind of this perpetual evergreen. This is going to happen time over time. And as opportunities present themselves, case by case, you can further direct monies. I'm also hearing some conversation around maybe building in a budget line item to throw money at this every year. That's a different
Mhm.
way of doing it for sure.
I do like the idea of like an initial, like, once we establish the account, maybe in this year's budget, doing it. I don't know if we need to do it perpetually, but at least to get the
Some
funds
seed.
started. Yeah. And then, and I don't know if it's 50,000 or 25,000, and then maybe just keeping with the recommendation for the 20%.
I mean,
just
what
to
are
get
these grants
started.
that you're applying for? Are they a lot?
It varies.
It's just very,
Really
very-
does. And sometimes you can get grants that, are for studying a certain aspect of a sustainability project. And then the next step is to implement from that. So this would be a way in which we could keep Jamie engaged in the grant world and have, not pass on opportunities.
No,
And
but I
we're doing
mean,
that
do
now.
you think, if we say 20,000, is that like, yay, like, I really feel like this is something we can work with, or, well, that's a good start, but we're gonna have to wait for more money to trickle in before we can really make an impact?
I think it'll be both
Okay.
because we've waited like 8 years to get to this point. So
Well, you're here, so ask for what you want, what you think you need.
So yay, the fund is there, and if there's an initial investment, that would be fantastic. And then just knowing that there is going to be regular contributions through electrical permit fees and things like that. That will build over time, because that was why we wanted it to be a separate account or a reserve account, so that it's not kind of a part of the annual budget, use it or lose it, that it can build over time, so that if we do have opportunities or, have an influx of money, then we can plan to do a larger project. And I'll just note too, that we're starting on our climate action plan. So there will be recommendations that come out of that will certainly put sustainability funds to use.
I mean, that's a very good point, which makes me feel like we wouldn't be wrong to put more than 20 in there. I don't really have a reference. I think it also shows the residents our commitment to sustainability.
I mean, we could say something like, it should be 50%, but cap it at X dollars per year, in case there's a year where all of a sudden we get all this. But again, I look at our fund balance, because again, what I understand is, we don't dedicate it here, it goes to unassigned fund balance.
Mhm.
And, putting $30,000 per year in here isn't gonna get us to our 16.6 goal. What is our fund balance? We heard it yesterday, it's like 15 million, is that correct? So again, this is like not even a 0.0000% of that. So,
So to your point, buck ahead is about approaching 24,000, $25,000.
mhm.
I mean, you kind of have to start somewhere. You have to have a specific, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is what we expect to return. The idea of replenishing the fund and seems that if council cedes it to 25, then you're going off pursuing grants. My personal preference would be that you pursue grants to do stuff rather than study stuff. We have a lot of studying. And then if you're coming back, I would expect to hear that sometimes we tried this and it failed. Okay, that we tried this and it exceeded our expectations. We did these things and they didn't have a monetary return, but they had these specific returns relative to our other objectives. And so we'd like a few more bucks. Those to me are all reasonable. And what I'm hearing is you're asking for a number to get us started. And, I probably sound like I have my MBA business hat on. But one of the very first things they teach you in the B school is not to let things don't undercapitalize your investment. That a real reason that small businesses fail is not because they don't have a good idea or all that stuff. It's that they don't have the working capital they need to get them through the trough. And so that's my point. I'd love to see this get some money and succeed.
Yeah.
So
So
that's why I'm making these points, because I think that kind of discipline is what ultimately gets projects like this to continue on in perpetuity and sustain themselves.
So I would like to make a motion to recommend that the committee recommend to the full council that we want to establish a sustainability reserve fund, that we fill that fund with surplus electrical permit fees with 50% of the surplus and in lieu fees from the electrical vehicle charging ordinance, and that we recommend the council considers a $25,000 seed in the FY26 budget to help increase the first pass of this fee getting set up.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I think that's a great start.
Oh,
Okay.
wait,
Yeah.
there's just one small piece.
Yeah.
I would love before this goes to the full council to see just a paragraph that kind of really delineates what you see as the parameters for the use of these funds. This is
Makes sense.
This is our guideline, because I would anticipate that the other four of our colleagues are going to want the answer to that question, and better that it comes from you than us.
I would just say all other reserve funds, and this one too, I would recommend is controlled by council. So I don't think you should, I don't think you can cede that authority over to staff or committee to make decisions for how to spend it.
Well,
The council has imposed discipline upon itself, not really discipline, but really for future councils, that this is the priority. They've, in some cases, Housing Alliance is a good example, have for itself articulated the allowable uses, and they're fairly broad, but they do their guide rails, if you will. And so I'd like to take a stab at putting together what this reserve account would look like that would have all the elements you just described. We can bring this back to you at your next meeting, because I think the devil's in the details.
So that can at least be our recommendation for now, and then you'll bring it back.
Sure, we'll bring it
We can
back
move it to
in keeping with these terms.
Chair.
Yep.
Finance Department would respectfully ask you to find what surplus is, or have staff bring back a recommendation to you what the definition of surplus is.
Okay. I at least see it in the memo as what was in the budget compared to actual, and the surplus is the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Okay, we've had some numbers thrown around like 20,000 and so forth, but.
Yeah.
But that's a different, in addition to that, what I hear, this is in the FY26 budget would be seed money that
Yeah.
also would be directed, which is a fairly irregular thing, but I understand the rationale.
Mhm. And again, the budget process can dictate whether that
Whether
it's a
it's a bias.
recommendation to do it, yeah,
Yeah, they can always put more in if they want.
or more, yeah.
Respectfully, Mr. Chair, you need to go.
All those in favor of the motion? All right, unanimous. So again, we'll get that next. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment? I'm not seeing any. Before we adjourn, just a suggestion. I'm sure everybody's seen a lot of the chatter online, and I'm glad that we kind of let the beach fees be out there. I think it would be great for the finance committee to review the fee financially and like better understand it at the next finance committee meeting.
Well, I thought it was scheduled for the February town council meeting.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing magical about that. I am sensitive to getting it in place in time for notice and
There is a very thoughtful timeline behind the fee introduction because it's Todd drilled into us about signs and getting things out there and about educating the residents. I will only say it was not on our radar at all for that proposal to come to finance. So it's been sitting on your desk for over a month. No offense, but like
Yeah.
not knowing that now you want to see it for finance, where I'm concerned
yeah, I'm hearing
of
this for the
somewhat of
first
a
Yeah.
delay.
Gonna-
Be surprising as
Yeah.
well.
But, and also, I just actually was texting the chair of that committee where I'm like, I need your help because this is a change. So now I'm asking committee members to come to a finance committee and all the town council meetings. So, and I think, and that's actually, I had that thought because now I'm on ordinance too. And I'm like, who does this go to? I don't know. In the past, as you've seen, it goes directly to council and Clucci just did whatever he wanted.
Yeah,
So I think, which is fine.
well, that's why I'm hoping if like in finance should look at it through the lens of understanding how this relates to the costs that we have. I'm just thinking of what Counselor, what was discussed yesterday about the fees, about really understanding how is this fee actually helping to offset true costs, and is this recommendation
Okay.
truly doing that? And if the committee did that and they're gonna be prepared to present that at first read, then I'm fine not doing it here. I do feel like this committee should be, before big fee changes take place, actually look at it from the
Well, and I
financial
don't think it's a
perspective.
big fee change per se. I think,
It's
It's not a
up and
big-
down. I think it's probably gonna balance out in large
yeah, we're
part.
reducing some of the fees.
I can say emphatically, beach fees, by far more than cover operational expense. In fact, it's also provides some capital support. So a lot of the work we do from a capital perspective is beach fees as well. So there's no concern on my part that operational fees would not be covered. In fact, I think it's probably a net neutral change, pretty
And I
much.
think the other thought I have is I do feel like because it's such a big issue, it might be more beneficial to just have it right at the council level
Fair.
instead of,
So my ask would be just as it gets presented, I'm assuming we're
So-
gonna
well,
have more
we-
detail on the
yes, but
financial.
just please keep in mind, it's me presenting. We lost Todd.
Ah.
And so, I mean,
I can help.
it's fine, but I'm just saying like, we'll do our best.
Yeah,
No,
Why
the
do you
committee's
Do you
great.
anticipate that, or do you anticipate controversy?
I mean, I actually went and read all the comments online because
I have. not.
I think the biggest feedback that I've seen, which I'm happy to discuss when people get to it, is the morning. I think people are not happy about that we want to have a flat fee all day because a lot of people go in the morning, but I will, and then I'm happy to elaborate why we made that recommendation at that
Yeah.
time, because there are substantial reasons why.
Most folks have a season pass.
Well, and also, I mean, Todd made the great point of the surfers are actually using our facilities the most. So they're paying $5 and they're coming in and they're showering and they're using all the facilities before anyone even gets there. And that is not equitable. It's not. And I think that was one of the comments. And so I think the committee talked about this at exhaust. I think when the committee members will show up in between all of that.
okay.
I have further recommendations for charging more and more restrictions beyond what they're recommending. So,
Hmm.
um,
So maybe it's not,
I think it's a
given
council thing.
given what you're saying though, again, is it appropriate to workshop it and not, I'm not saying we have to, I'm just saying.
It's like too many cooks. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, it sounds like you have, there's a recommendation that they're proposing. You have
Based
other
on
recommendations.
a lot of research and
Mhm.
information that they've done. I'm concerned if we workshop it, we're gonna have 7 counselors going, but what about this? And what about this? And we're gonna spend hours hemming and hawing over something that we're getting a recommendation. I mean, this is straight from Todd, his department. We
Mhm.
met, like his staff gives us the feedback. Our committee went out to all of the communities. You'll see all the data and the research has been done. I'm worried about delaying that, getting the fees
Okay.
out there. That's it.
All right.
And I suppose, worst case, if you're met with a bunch of confusion or controversy, you can workshop it in between, if that's, you know, how it's postured, at least initially.
Yeah, this is probably one of those things where it's a first read, public hearing, and second read with maybe an opportunity for a workshop in between.
And you should take a lesson from John Clucci. As I recall, he made that change in second reading, like final vote, gavel down.
Yeah. at
So
like 10
everyone's
o'clock.
surprised. It was late.
Okay, all right. So nothing, then with that, I don't know if there's anything else for the next agenda other than maybe,
Two things I'll just mention in passing. This is a conversation, I think both you and Don have been part of, is staff's digging into really trying to identify the financial impact of growth. And there's a bunch of different angles to take, whether it's budgetary or cost to serve and so on and so forth. It's a pretty big undertaking, but it's one the staff is anxious to dig into. So that is probably, I don't know if it's an agenda item for your next meeting, but in future meetings, I think we'd love to use you as a sounding board. The other one is the Higas Parkway TIF. I had a revelation last night. I should have known this right along, but by the end of FY '25, we will have satisfied the deficit and will effectively, other than covering SEDCO costs, have no other qualified purposes to use those TIF revenues. So one thought we have is to apply to DCD to modify the allowable uses, to expand those uses. For us to do that, we need to effectively get the application into them by March 1st. So we'd like to start moving in that direction, and we'd like to involve you in that process.
sounds good. So it sounds like next agenda is continuing the sustainability.
Yes, we'll have, yep,
If we have room for updates on financial analytics around growth, even if it's still in process, I think just
yeah.
getting an
No, we'll
update.
give you an update.
And then third is this Higgis Parkway.
Perfect.
I think that's probably plenty.
And we're doing a budget in the meantime.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we might need, if we want to give you feedback live on
sure,
the budget workshop presentation and what we would like staff to have. So I think this.
that'd be great. So we'll send off the slide deck. Maybe that's your homework, and
Yeah.
you want to include that just as a prompt on the
Yeah,
agenda?
that'd be good.
We'll start with that just
Yeah.
to move through it. Okay, thank you.
Any other agenda items or thoughts? No? Right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, thanks, guys.